Henry Cejudo was the talk of the town in Chicago all week, and in the eyes of many, he stole the show, but perhaps not in the best of ways if you're not into capes and crowns and all that jazz. But regardless of that, yet again, he is the talk after the fight, after the card. Main event of UFC 238. He defeats Marlon Moraes via third round TKO, and he is your new double champ and your new UFC bantamweight champion. We also had UFC Women's Flyweight Champion Valentina Shevchenko defend her title for the first time with a vicious knockout win over Jessica I. And also, we had Tony Ferguson get back into the cage against fan favorite veteran, all around great guy, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, in a fight that, although ended prematurely, I think lived up to expectations. Hello, everybody. I am Nick Baldwin, BloodyElbow.com. I'm super happy to be joined by UFC bantamweight Brian Kelleher, and this is our UFC 238 post-fight show. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Glad to recap the fights. We had some amazing fights last night, so looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Let's get right into it because, of course, stack card. I think it played out that way too. A lot of fun fights, and there's a lot to talk about. Starting with the main event, of course, as I said, Cejudo gets it done. Ground and pound TKO over Magic Marlon Moraes late in the third round. First of all, is this what you were expecting? Were you surprised that not only did Cejudo win, he had a lot of success? It was kind of like the story of two fights. Moraes started out really well. Cejudo made some adjustments in that second, and once Moraes was getting tired in that third, and he really was, it seemed, Cejudo was able to take it home and win that title. Were you surprised by what happened?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised that Cejudo won. I always felt like he had a chance in this fight, especially with what he's done as of late with beating Demetrius Johnson and then TJ Dillashaw back to back. Really impressed with the guy's ability to improve over the years. And we saw Marlon start off really strong in this fight with the leg kicks, and he was really hurting that leg of Henry Cejudo, who was standing in a southpaw stance for the majority of the fight, which I was curious about. I'm like, you know what? Maybe those rumors about his injury were true, because usually he's more regular, righty stance. And then he was switched to southpaw for the most of the fight. So I was like, wow, something's got to be up with that. But he started the fight off a little bit timid, a little bit slow. And it seems like he just woke up out of nowhere, and Marlon started to fade and he started to come on strong. And that's where you saw the shift in the fight happen. So really impressed by the way Henry Cejudo was able to make those adjustments during the fight with taking those leg kicks and then switching the momentum. And it was amazing.
And as you said, Cejudo revealed after the fight that he fought with an injured ankle. He sprained his left ankle, I believe, on Wednesday or Thursday, just days before this fight. The biggest of his life, a huge fight against Marlon Moraes, a very difficult fight. Moraes is one tough guy. Does that make it all the more impressive? There was reports, I think, just before open workouts that Cejudo had hurt himself. He, of course, downplayed it, denied it, said he just bumped himself. But clearly there was an injury. He sprained his ankle. Does that make this all the more impressive?
Yeah, to me, it makes it even more impressive, to be honest, because fighting a guy like Marlon at 135, who seems to be a lot bigger of a fighter than Henry Cejudo, coming in injured like that with a sprained ankle. They showed pictures, his coach was showed pictures of the sprained ankle that happened just days before the fight. So to have to face that adversity and then come out on top it just makes it all that much more impressive.
And Moraes, as I said, he started out really strong, and then Cejudo made some adjustments. But the thing is, something I noticed is Marlon really started to tire, and it seemed to happen quite rapidly, quite quickly. Did you notice that as well? Am I right here? And if so, why do you think Moraes all of a sudden sort of lost his entire gas tank closer to the end of the fight?
100%. You hit the nail on the head. I noticed it. I saw his breathing start to change and he started to become a lot more lethargic. Marlon Moraes is a very muscular guy for the weight class, and he seems to cut a lot of weight. I know he gets up into the high 160s outside of fight camp. So, doing that weight cut like that, it can take a toll on you, especially with a guy like Cejudo is now fighting at a more natural weight at 135. He's able to put on a faster pace. And I think Marlon throws shots with such power that every single shot he's throwing is a lot of torque, a lot of explosion, and that could take a toll on you as far as cardio goes.
Well, and there's a trend in these super fights, or when a champion moves up in weight and fights another champion or a contender, and it's a big opportunity, a big fight. There's a trend in that the lighter fighter or the fighter cutting less weight has won. If you go back to when Conor fought Eddie, he was coming up from 45 to 55. When DC fought Stipe, he moved up to heavyweight from 205. Nunes against Cyborg, she moved up. You had Dillashaw going down, cutting more weight against Cejudo. Cejudo, the lighter fighter, gets it done. And yet again, Cejudo moves up in weight, cuts less weight than Moraes, and gets it done. Is that just a coincidence, or is there a trend that, hey, in these big title fights, if you were cutting less weight and maybe even the smaller guy, you somehow have an advantage?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a true thing in the sport. I think obviously with the hydration and for your brain to be fully hydrated going into these fights, you're able to take a little bit more shots, and it seems like just cardio wise too, you're sharper, you're thinking faster, and you're reacting better when you're fighting at a more natural weight. I think the big fear for a lot of fighters is being the smaller guy physically, but it seems like that's less of an advantage than it is to just be fighting at a more natural weight with 100% energy and being able to perform to the best of your ability.
As a bantamweight yourself, is it a little strange when a flyweight, I mean, he's a champion, of course, so not to, discredit who he is as a fighter or his skills, but when a guy who has almost never fought at 35 before, I think he did once in the UFC, but that was back in 2014, a long time ago, a completely different fighter. Is it strange when a guy who isn't on your radar, isn't on any of your bantamweight fellow bantamweights on their radar either? I mean, you can have a top 5 fighter, Hoffler Sensao. He hasn't talked about Cejudo once in his life except for now, because now he's the one, going after Cejudo. Is it strange when a guy comes in and sort of gets right to the top without, right away?
No, to me, it's not strange. Maybe to some other fighters, at the top of the division, trying to, focus on the landscape of the division and see who their potential future opponents are going to be, not really looking at Cejudo as a potential guy, but he comes out of nowhere from 125 and takes out one of the best pound for pound in the bantamweight division, TJ Dillashaw. I think that kind of put him on the radar for all these guys at bantamweight. And it could be weird, yeah, because of how quickly he exploded onto the scene at 135. But for me, anybody could do anything in this fight game. The fight game's unpredictable, and guys moving up and down weight classes. It happens all the time to try to revive your career and to try to start new matchups and stuff like that. So to me, it happens, man. It's just part of the game. Guys move around all the time.
The UFC is in a bit of a transition period right now because they don't have their stars that they did a couple years ago. Conor McGregor isn't fighting regularly. Ronda Rousey is practically retired, overdoing pro wrestling, of course. John Jones has sort of stepped up, and I think that transition period is starting to end with John Jones coming back, but DC's retiring soon. Khabib, I mean, yes, I guess like Jones, Khabib is one of their biggest stars right now, and he's starting to fight a bit more regularly. Do you think Cejudo's that guy? Can Cejudo be a star, or is he already? Keeping in mind his gimmick, sort of the king of cringe, do you like that? And can Cejudo be a star?
To me, seeing what Cejudo has done, he's kind of changed his whole shtick. He's obviously, the quote unquote the king of cringe now. I feel like guys are just taking that WWE route towards the fight game, knowing that this is going to create a lot more hype behind you. It's almost like a benefit to have a lot of people that hate you as well as a lot of people that love you, because the people that hate you, they want to see you lose so bad that they want to tune in. And that's what I think Henry Cejudo's done. I think that's what his vision is with the way that he's, put on that whole attitude change and the way he's talking trash and his whole gimmick with the king crown coming out like that. It's kind of corny at times, in my opinion, but I understand it. As far as business goes, it's a smart move. Henry Cejudo's definitely knows what he's doing. He said he took a lot of advice from Chael Sonnen, and Chael Sonnen's one of the biggest stars in the game, coming out with all his trash talk. So he's doing the right things as far as trying to make money. That's for sure.
And last thing on this main event before we keep going, how does this affect the 125-pound division? Cejudo, his mission, it seems, this year with the Dillashaw fight and now with this fight, but especially the TJ fight in January, was to save the flyweight division. Dana White said yesterday at the post-fight press conference that he confirmed that the flyweight division is sticking around, but with 12 or 13 fighters on the rankings, there's not even enough fighters on the flyweight roster to make up a top 15. Do you believe Dana? Do you believe Henry and everyone who says 125 is staying around, or is flyweight's days numbered?
Yeah, I think that Henry is just trying his hardest to keep the division alive, but I don't know if I quite believe everything Dana says. I feel like sometimes, for the shock factor, he could be planning moves that he just doesn't want to let out the truth yet, and then we find out in the near future that this is what he's been working on, and then it's kind of an element of surprise. So with the flyweight division, it's just a really awkward situation because you see a lot of high level flyweights that have been cut, and you see some guys that are still sticking around. And to me, I feel it's based off contracts. You can't cut someone off of a win. And so if there's still fights left on their deal, I feel like the UFC is just trying to fulfill those leftover fights and then make a decision from there. Obviously, we have Joseph Benavidez, who has beat Henry Cejudo in the past, and a lot of people want to see that rematch at 125. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe they'll have Henry try to defend both belts. He says he wants to be an active champion in both weight classes. I hope they keep the flyweights around. It's just like, what are they going to do? They've cut like half of the division, if not more. So something's going on here.
When Cejudo beat Dillashaw in January, I was on board with the idea that, yes, maybe he did just save the division because Dillashaw, if Dillashaw had won both belts and had been in the same situation Cejudo's in now, then I just imagine, get rid of flyweight, focus on bantamweight. It's simple. Now with this win, though, he's in that situation that I feared TJ might have gotten in before all of that happened, the knockout, the USADA suspension, everything. Now that he's focused, or now that he's the 35 champ too, I really don't know. I mean, no double champion has gone back and forth divisions, defended both. I don't know if I can believe just yet Cejudo can be that guy. I mean, if Nunes can't, or DC can't, or Connor can't, why Cejudo? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Only time will tell. But also, Cejudo's talking about. I mean, he called out 3 bantamweights. He didn't call out Jussier Formiga or Benavidez, and he mentioned 45. I mean, how confident can I be that he's going to defend at 25 if he's already talking about a potential future move to featherweight? Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying 100%. It's really hard to actually envision it happening like that, where he goes back and forth and stays active, especially with how many guys are left at flyweight. It just doesn't seem like there's enough challengers for him to actually defend that title enough times. I feel like his vision is, where's the most money? Where's the biggest payday? Who's the biggest star that I can fight? Who's the biggest draw? That's where selfishly these fighters look as champions. They don't always look as to be a champion who just defends his title against the number one contender in every weight class that he holds a title. So Henry's looking for the biggest star. He didn't even mention Aljamain Sterling, who put on a great performance. Right. I feel like he deserves the next shot, especially he fought Moraes and lost to him. Maybe if Moraes won, they would have gave Moraes someone else, but Henry won. It's a fresh new matchup. Let's get Henry versus Aljo. That's what I feel is next. But it seems like Henry's completely discluding him out of that talk. So it's interesting to see what happens next.
In the co-main event, we had the UFC women's flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko with a early second round thunderous head kick knockout of challenger Jessica Eye. Shevchenko, of course, going in was a huge betting favorite, the biggest on the card, even bigger than Tatiana Suarez, who defeated Nina Ansaroff on the prelim card. And I mean, is this what you're expecting, Brian? Because I think no one was picking Jessica Eye. Very few people gave her a chance in this fight. Whether or not you should have, I don't know. But Shevchenko, put her away. It wasn't a 5-round decision. It wasn't a one-sided decision. This was a brutal knockout, and maybe one of the most brutal in women's MMA history, or just MMA history. This was a huge knockout. Did you expect this from Valentina?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't expect a big knockout finish like that. We've seen her previous fight. She's very highly skilled. I feel like as far as technique goes and just overall well-rounded skills go, she's leaps above these other women in these divisions. But I didn't expect a KO like that. Brutal knockout. Most women's fights don't, generate power like that, where you see a a flush KO like that where the girl's out for a while, I was a little bit worried about Jessica Eye. Hopefully she's okay. But yeah, Shevchenko was setting up those body kicks, and Jessica Eye was standing very sideways, where almost like she was facing that southpaw kick that was coming her way. And she lowered her hands, beautifully set up to the body, and then she went high, and it landed flush on the temple, put her out cold. I really didn't expect it, though. I thought it was going to go to a decision. We've seen Shevchenko just kind of outpoint other fighters and take them down and use very good top control and just kind of win fights by points. But beautiful KO.
As far as what is next for Shevchenko, is there anyone that can give her a run for her money at women's 125? We've seen her lose to the best, Nunes, at 35, but she's undefeated at flyweight. She just seems so much more skilled and talented than everyone else. Not to discredit everybody, because Caitlin Chukagian had a great win last night over Joanne Calderwood. She maybe is next, but if I have to be honest, does Chukagian have much more of a chance against Shevchenko than I did? I mean, probably not. I beat Chukagian just 6 months ago or so. Is there anyone that can really touch Valentina at this weight class, do you think?
It's hard to see, man. It's hard to see that happening. Like I said, I think skill-wise, she's just like way above these other girls in the division. I do believe Caitlin could be next. I don't see her putting up much of a better challenge against Shevchenko. I think that's a really tough fight for her. But the one thing Caitlin does have on her side is she's elusive, she's evasive, she's very has a very high output, and she could try to win a decision by just outpointing her. But I just don't see that happening. As far as skill wise, striking wise, I see Shevchenko being levels above her, and yeah, I don't really see much of a challenge for her right now. It's hard to see who could really put up a good fight against her.
This was one of the criticisms I would say I've heard against Shevchenko is she doesn't finish fights as often as she should. She is dangerous. She's obviously a very talented striker, and she has a very good submission game as well, but she hasn't been putting away her opponents maybe as much as fans would like to see from her. Can we put that to rest, though? I mean, she clearly has knockout power more than a lot of women's flyweight fighters, I would argue. Can we put that sort of idea to rest that, hey, Shevchenko doesn't finish fights? This girl seems to be quite dangerous.
Oh yeah, 100%. You have to respect that now that you saw a KO like that. But I don't know if you could fully put it to rest, because just one knockout doesn't mean all of a sudden we're gonna see this girl go on a tear and start knocking people out left and right. Of course you got to respect it, but we'll see what happens in the near future when she fights other fighters, that maybe aren't as aggressive or like to move, be a little bit more evasive and try to outpoint people. We'll see what happens next if she fights a girl like Caitlin, if she could put her away.
Yeah. But this was good for her career, I would think, because although a decision win, one-sided win over Joanna Jędrzejczyk was very good, very impressive for her career, for her resume, I think fans are going to look this and think, hey, last time I didn't want to see Shevchenko fight, and this fight I wasn't looking forward to, but the next Valentina Shevchenko fight I'm excited for.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think this revives her career in that aspect as far as excitement and people wanting to, eyes being drawn in to want to see her fight next. Anytime you see a KO like that, it gives you that excitement to see what happens next with that fight.
Okay, Tony Ferguson, Donald Cerrone. A lot of people build this as the people's main event, and I got to be honest, this is the one I was most anticipating heading into UFC 238. Unfortunately, it was called a bit short, ended a bit prematurely, middle or between the rounds 2 and 3. Cerrone his face was already beat up, and then he blew his nose, and then his eye swelled up immediately. It ballooned up, and he couldn't see out of his eye really whatsoever, and the doctors had no choice but to call it and give Ferguson the doctor stoppage TKO victory. First of all, is this the first 2 rounds, before we talk about Cerrone blowing his nose and the finish and all that, the first 2 rounds, is that what you're expecting? Ferguson basically walked Cerrone down, hit him a lot more than Cerrone did Ferguson, but Cerrone still had his moments. He still landed nice shots. He still had his fair share of output, but Ferguson just kept walking forward and wouldn't take a step backwards.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't expect was for Cerrone to start that strong. Usually he's had incidences where he's having trouble in the locker room pre-fight and he's not feeling it. He doesn't have that energy to want to compete, and then he goes out there, starts very slow in the first round and comes alive in the second and third. In this fight, I think he knew, because it wasn't a 5-round fight, he had to get started fast if he was going to win this fight. And Ferguson comes right at you, throwing high volume. He's in your face, hard guy to put away. But like you said, Cerrone did have his moments. He had a lot of good connections, accurate strikes. But Ferguson's just a different beast, man. He's funky in there. His movement is unpredictable, hard to see what's coming at you. It's not, a traditional boxing style. His striking is just something different. He's very creative on the spot. I think one of his biggest strengths is how he can improvise in there during the fight. Uh, but the fight was really competitive, and I wish it could have been 5 rounds. And what an unfortunate way to finish it. We'll see if they end up booking a rematch or what goes on from here.
And something that I took away from this fight is if you aren't in the know and following the sports news on a day-to-day basis, watching this fight, you would have no idea that Tony has been out since October dealing with personal issues. A lot of people thought he might look a little rusty or just not quite himself because of what's been going on in his life, but he looked, in my opinion, maybe even better than ever.
I could agree with that. I was thinking the same thing, his personal issues, how long he's been out. But Ferguson, as far as the mentality goes, the guy is a savage. He seemed very, very dialed in and focused. Once I saw his look, I like to kind of judge guys on their energy when I'm watching, and before the fight happens, and see the lead up of the fight and how they're handling themselves. And Tony seemed to be in great spirits compared to where he was before that whole thing happened. He was very mean and like intense with the media, and he seemed a little bit happier and a little bit more just at peace with things. And it showed in the fight, man. He looked better than ever.
As you mentioned, Dana White, I believe, said something at the presser last night about a rematch that it could happen. He didn't say outright that he wants to see Cowboy running back with Tony for sure. That's his next fight, 100%. But he said maybe it could happen. Do you have any interest in it? Is it necessary?
It's sad because how many wins and big victories Tony Ferguson has had in the division, right? But same thing for Cowboy Cerrone. The guy's had ups and downs throughout his whole career, moving up to 170, back to 155, has his kid Danger. He's more focused and more dedicated than ever to try to get that title. And it's just sad to see either one of those guys fall off. It's like you want to see them both kind of get that title at some point, or at least get the chance to fight for the title. Really, we have to see what happens with Khabib and Poirier. And we got Conor on the sidelines, and that with Conor, he could just jump in and do whatever he wants at any point, which is unfortunate for guys who have earned their spot. I guess we can see the rematch because we don't know what's going to happen till September with Poirier and Khabib, so we have some time, which leads me to believe that they'll try to get this rematch in a little bit quicker, and then we'll see what happens from there.
My only thought though is like I would watch the rematch. I don't have much of an interest in it, but what one thing is you mentioned, we have time between Khabib and Poirier, but I'm not sure we do. Cerrone's face was he was beat up. He was badly beat up. His eye was swollen, of course, and perhaps that'll go down quickly and stuff. But I don't want to see him fight next month. He does not need to fight in July, and so I don't know if there is time, even if it made sense to do the rematch with Ferguson before that fight between Khabib and Poirier. And to add on to that, I just don't know we need to see it. Not only does Cowboy need time to recover, but does that fight go any differently? Ferguson seemed to be taken over. The first round was close. Second round was all Tony, in my opinion. Third round would have been dominant for Ferguson, I think. And I just don't think we need to see it.
Yeah, it definitely looked like as the fight was going on, it was going downhill for Cerrone. I will say that. I agree with that. I did see Ferguson probably taking the second and third clearly in the fight, and getting the decision, at least if he didn't catch a finish. But like you said, yeah, Cerrone took this fight on fairly short notice. Said he
Yeah.
was on vacation, had fought Ally Quinta not too long ago, like 3-4 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and now he's fighting Tony. So yeah, to make a quick rematch, I could agree it'd be tough for Cerrone. He definitely has to heal up and take a little bit of time. Maybe we see Ferguson if Khabib wins. Maybe we see that fight finally. For what, a fourth or fifth time they book it. So who knows?
And I guess my point is, if these guys weren't in the title picture, maybe we do a rematch. Maybe, I mean, it'd be fun. I'd watch it, of course. But guess what? Ferguson is the number one contender. He is in the title picture. He's on a 12-fight winning streak. I really just hope there's no denying him a title shot. I don't even want to, at this point, I don't even want him to fight Conor first. I would watch the fight. McGregor Ferguson is fight we've talked about before, of course. We've talked about it sometime years ago, but I just want Ferguson versus the champion. He's been the interim champion before. He didn't deserve to be stripped of that title. He should have had an undisputed lightweight title shot probably 2 years ago or more. In my opinion, it would be criminal if his next fight isn't for the undisputed title. I just hope he fights the winner of Khabib and Poirier.
I'm with you on that, man. I feel like the word deserve is just a controversial word, you know? It's like who deserves what, but man, if you could put the word deserve on anybody, it's Tony Ferguson. The guy deserves a title shot. It's like he's been putting in work against the top guys in the division for so long now, for so many years. He's on one of the longest winning streaks there is. And I think the fact that the Khabib fight fell through so many times, it almost creates even more desire to want to see that fight. You know, it's like people just want to see the two true best guys go against each other. So I'm cool with no rematch. I really do hope Ferguson gets the fight with the winner of Khabib and Poirier. He definitely, he's earned his shot there. He's the people's champ, right? So we'll see what happens.
All right, we'll go through a few more fights a bit quicker than we did the top three, and then we'll wrap it up. Petr Yan continues his winning streak, still undefeated in the UFC. He gets it done by unanimous decision against Jimmy Rivera, taking all 3 rounds on all 3 judges' scorecards. Were you a little surprised by how dominant Yan was? But the thing is, I say how dominant he was, but Jimmy Rivera might have won the actual fight, but Yan won the rounds. And what I mean by that is Rivera started strong. He did well throughout the round, and then Yan, in 2 of 3 rounds minimum, catches him at the end and knocks him down badly and steals the round. And then I think in the third, it was a bit more Petr Yan throughout the whole round. What did you make of the fight? Were you surprised how it went down, and were you surprised by Yan's dominance?
Yeah, as far as overall dominance, I was actually impressed with Rivera's ability to be aggressive and land some heavy boxing shots in the pocket. I think that was a very good style matchup for a guy like Rivera. But Yan, was able to get those big knockdowns. And I think as far as judges go, that leaves a mark, at the end of rounds like that. If you can knock a guy down and almost finish a fight, that leaves it in the judges' minds. Okay, that looks like that guy won that round just at the end of the round based off that. Overall, the whole fight, though, I feel like Rivera did a great job with landing those boxing strikes, recovering from those knockdowns, and really getting aggressive in there, especially after his last fight. Kind of an embarrassing performance for him against Aljamain Sterling, and he wanted redemption, and you could see it in his eyes. He was more focused in there, and he was letting go. But yeah, Yan has been a killer. He's been running through guys in the division, and I honestly thought he would probably finish Rivera. But props to Rivera. He hung in there throughout the 3 rounds. We'll see what they do with Yan next.
All right. Also on the or going to the featured prelim bout now, we had Tatiana Suarez get it done against Nina Ansaroff, remain undefeated in the UFC strawweight division, but it didn't come without she did have to face a little adversity. Ansaroff had a good third round, and she started to turn it up late in that frame, and I wish there was another minute because Ansaroff, I think, actually hurt Suarez a little bit, literally with just 10 seconds left, and I wanted to know what would have happened in that last minute if it existed. If it was a 6-minute round, would Ansaroff had caught her and knocked her out, or would Suarez have recovered? We don't know, and we'll never know. But were you surprised by how well Ansaroff did, by Suarez's lack of dominance, so to speak? And do you still consider this a good win for Tatiana?
It's a good win for Tatiana. I mean, she used her wrestling for the majority of the fight. And like you said, third round, she came out there and had to face adversity. What's her name again? The girl she fought? I'm sorry.
Ansaroff.
Yeah, Nina Ansaroff. She came out. It was just a case of too little, too late. It was like third round. She came alive and decided, you know what? I'm gonna start letting go. I'm gonna start fighting. That's the problem when you face a dominant wrestler like that. You start to question your ability to pull the trigger because you're worried about that takedown so much. It makes you look like way less of a striker than you actually are. And we saw that in the third round. Nina was like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw caution to the wind and start trying to finish this fight. I think she played a little bit too much on her back in guard. When you're on your back like that, if you're not really throwing elbows and submission after submission, you're losing the fight. That's just how it is in these judges' eyes. So to me, just a case of too little, too late. Like you said, I wish, we could have got an extra minute on the end of that third round to see what would have happened.
Does Suarez deserve the shot? Because going in, this was a title eliminator, and kind of an interesting point. There's two title fights on this card, but there's also a whole ton of sort of number one contender fights, or so we think. This is one of them. Does Suarez deserve it though? Because this was a less dominant performance than what people were expecting. She was a huge betting favorite, the second on the card only to Shevchenko against Aya, of course. Michelle Waterson is there. Dana White shut that down, says Waterson doesn't want to fight till the fall and is ranked too low to get the next shot. But you also have the option of maybe doing Andrade Namajunas 2 right away, because Namajunas started out strong in the fight and then got slammed, KO'd. What is next for Tatiana? Does she deserve Andrade?
I think they're going to make the fight. I think obviously because Rose is questioning retirement and she left that fight up in the air. We don't know what's going to go on with her, where her head is at. With that said, it seems like Rose is going to want to take some more time off and get her stuff together. So I believe they're going to try to make the matchup with Suarez and Andrade, which I think is a good style matchup for Tatiana with the heavy wrestling. You don't really want to get into a brawl or a striking exchange with a girl like Andrade, who's very strong though in the clinch as well. But not the most impressive and dominant performance for Suarez coming off this fight with Nina to try to get herself in a title fight. But I think she has a lot of hype behind her. The promotion believes in her. They seem to be pushing her, and I think that's what they'll most likely do next.
All right, last fight we will talk about is Aljamain Sterling. He's been mentioned already. He defeated Pedro Munoz by 3-round unanimous decision, winning all 3 rounds, but that doesn't really tell the story of the fight. This, in my opinion, was the fight of the night. Cerrone Ferguson was a lot of fun, but I think just with how it ended and all that, I think Sterling and Munoz deserved fight of the night, that extra 50 grand, but I don't make those decisions. That's just what I think. Sterling looked really good. Munoz looked really good. I think both of their stock goes up here. My sort of read on this fight and takeaway is this is a whole new Funk Master. This is a different Aljamain Sterling than we've seen before. He was a lot more aggressive. He came forward more. He was more active, threw a lot more. But I kind of feel maybe it was just because of who he was fighting. Pedro Munoz, I mean, he has pressure like very few fighters. He just kept going forward. He didn't take a step backwards, and he tried to finish Sterling. He couldn't, but put on one heck of a performance. Is this a different Funk Master, or did Munoz sort of turn Aljo into this sort of active guy, more active than he's been?
I think this is a different Funk Master. I've trained with Aljamain before. I'm really impressed with his ability to have come back from that knockout loss to Moraes and put on performances like this, beating a guy like a convincing win over Jimmy Rivera, and now really showing a different aggressive side to his game. Very high output. He's a hard guy to fight, man. The way that he lets go of strikes. I don't know how many strikes were thrown in that fight, but that was like nonstop action. And I agree. I thought it was fight of the night. I don't know why, they gave it to Ferguson Cerrone. I feel like Cerrone's just like, he gets bonuses every fight card. But Aljamain looked very impressive. Pedro coming off that knockout win against Cody Garbrandt. Very aggressive. I think the style matchup is favored Aljo, but most styles do. The way that the guy fights, he stays on the outside. He has long range. He uses his kicks very well to keep you at bay. And anytime you try to get really close with him, he's using those teep kicks and those side kicks, and very funky style, hard to deal with. And man, what a performance. I hope he gets his shot next too.
So I guess, you just said it. That was going to be my next question. And I think we already kind of said it earlier when talking about Cejudo, but can we both agree that it's Cejudo, Sterling, or bust?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the right thing to do, but that's not always the thing that they do, So it's really up to what the promotion is going to do from here. Obviously, the champion holds the most power, so whatever Cejudo is going to push for is most likely what the promotion's going to look for, I feel. And he didn't mention Aljo, so that's just I find that weird. If you want to be a real champion, in my opinion, and challenge the true number one contender, you fight Aljo next. but money is what gets in the way of that. So we'll see what they do with Cejudo. I hope they make the matchup. We'll see what's next.
One last thing on Sterling is, as you said, this is the different Funk Master. And Dana said yesterday at the press conference that, and maybe not the most fair thing to say, but he said if Sterling had fought like this for his entire career, he'd be a star right now. And maybe that would be the case. Again, I mean, it's hard to say that when, I mean, we'll never know. I mean, Sterling fought like the way he fought, and now he's, you know, maybe a bit more exciting, change things up. I don't know, but what is Sterling's potential? Now, obviously, he's next in line probably for the title shot. We hope that makes the most sense, and not necessarily will he beat Cejudo, but this guy, he's still young, and now that he clearly has come into his own, and that was sort of the criticism of Sterling a couple years ago, is that he didn't quite find himself just yet. I mean, he was a top prospect in 2014, fell short a couple times, but now he's at the top of the game. He's doing so well. Is the sky the limit for Sterling? Is this a guy that maybe not if he fights Cejudo next, maybe he falls short, but sometime in his career, is this guy a UFC champion?
I believe so, man. I believe confidence is a huge factor in this game, and I've seen Aljo grow and how he's fought, you know, in the past compared to this fight is slowly coming along. But you see a guy that has a lot more confidence in his ability to have output and to fight a little bit more aggressive and more impressive for the promotion. You know, he called out Sean Shelby after the fight. I hope that was impressive enough for you. And I think he deserves it. I mean, he's definitely improved leaps and bounds. He's taken a big loss, and we've seen him recover from that and fight even better after that, which is not typical. Usually you see guys start to question themselves after losses like that. But he's done the opposite, and now he's dialed in. He's fighting better than ever, and now's the time. You know, he's 29 years old. He's in the prime of his career. I believe now's the time to see if this guy's a world champion. Give him his chance.
Well, Aljamain Sterling got it done against Pedro Munoz. Hopefully next in line for the bantamweight title fight against Henry Cejudo. Tatiana Sora stays undefeated, gets it done against Nina Ansaroff, but maybe pumping the brakes on Tatiana Suarez a little bit. Petr Yan continues his reign of dominance in the UFC bantamweight division, gets it done against the veteran Jimmy Rivera. Very close to a title shot, of course. You know, unfortunately for him, Aljamain probably deserves a bit more, but Petr is right behind him, in my opinion. Tony Ferguson, I'm so happy to see him back, healthy, happy, and back sort of in the lightweight division and in the title picture. If he doesn't fight Khabib, Poirier winner next, then there's something wrong with this sport of mixed martial arts we like. Valentina Shevchenko continues her dominance in the women's flyweight division, gets it done with a brutal head kick over Jessica Eye in the co-feature. And of course, the main event, the King of Cringe gets it done yet again, continues this unlikely reign. I mean, if you think about it, how crazy is it that Cejudo is a two-division champion? I mean, getting past Demetrius Johnson is something no one thought would happen, then knocking out TJ Dillashaw, then defeating Marlon Moraes in the fashion he did. How crazy is it that Cejudo is the champ in two weight classes? But he is, and he said it.
Did you know he has a gold medal?
You know what? I didn't. That's brand new news to me. So I appreciate you adding that, Brian.
Yeah, no problem. Figured I'd let you know.
UFC 238 went down from the United Center in Chicago last night. Great card, and I'm very excited to see what is next for Cejudo. Maybe next time we do this, he'll be the light heavyweight champion. Who knows? I think that is it, Brian. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Quickly let everybody know where they can find you on social media, and if you got any last words, go for it.
Yeah, man, this was awesome. My pleasure. I had a good time. I'd love to do it again. You can find me on social media at Twitter and Instagram at BrianBoom135. YouTube channel, just search my name, Brian Kelleher. I do the boom breakdowns for the cards, and that's about it, man. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, you guys can find me on Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA and check out all of my coverage at bloodyelbow.com. I think that is it. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the fights, and we'll see you again soon.